Om Namo Narayana, Jai Swaminarayan, and welcome back, as today we work our way through, I think, maybe the last bit of Swami Vivekananda's lecture, The History of the Aryan Race. So let's just dive right in and see if we can finish it up. Behind and beyond all these devas and men and animals and worlds is the ruler of the universe, Ishvara, somewhat similar to what in the New Testament is called God, the creator, preserver, the ruler of the universe. These devas are not to be confused with Ishvara at all, but in the English language you have the same word for both. You use the word God in the singular and the plural, but the gods are the bright ones, the devas, and God is Ishvara. Does that make sense to you? This is what we find in the oldest portions of the Vedas. Another peculiarity is that this Ishvara, this God, is manifesting himself in all these various forms as the bright ones. This idea that the same God manifests himself in various forms is a very rudimentary idea of the Vedas, even in the oldest portions. There was a time when a sort of monotheistic idea entered into the Vedas, but it was very quickly rejected. As we go on, perhaps you will agree with me, it's very good that it was rejected. So we find in these oldest portions of the Samhitas that there were these devas, these beings praised as the manifestations of someone much higher than them, so that sometimes each one of them was taken up, and adjectives piled on it, and at last it was said, "You are God of the universe." And then we get passages that say things like, "I am God, worshipped as the fire." He is that one existence, the sages call him by various names. This I ask you to remember because this is the turning point, the keynote of all thought that India has produced. He is the one being, sages call him variously. All Hindu philosophy, whether it's theistic or atheistic or monotheistic, dualistic or non-dualistic, has that as the core, the center. That is the key. And by thousands of years of culture in the race, it is impossible for the Hindu race to go away from that idea. The germ became a bigger tree, and that is why there was never religious persecution in India, or at least by the Hindus. That explains their liberality and welcome to any religion from any part of the world which came to settle there. This is how, even in the present day, Indian Rajas go and perform Mohammedan ceremonies and enter Mohammedan mosques, although some Mohammedans took the first opportunity to kill a number of the heathens. He is the one being. Sages call him variously. There have been two theories advanced in modern times with regard to the growth of religion. The one is the tribal theory, the other is the spirit theory. The tribal theory is that humanity in its savage state remains divided into many small tribes. Each tribe has a god of its own, or sometimes the same god divided into many forms, as the god of this city came to that city, etc. The Jehovah of this city and the such and such mountain came to such and such city or mountain. When the tribes came together, one of them became strong and would dominate. There is the other theory of spiritualism, that religion begins with the worship of ancestors. Ancestor worship was among the Egyptians, the Babylonians, among many other races, including the Hindus and Christians. There is not one form of religion among which there has not been this ancestor worship in some form or other. Before that, they thought that this body had a double inside in it, and that when this body dies, the double gets out and lives on as long as the body remains. The double becomes very hungry or thirsty, wants food or drink, and wants to enjoy the good things of this world. So the double comes to get the food, and if he does not get it, he will injure even his own little children. So long as this body is preserved, the double will live. Naturally, the first attempt, as we see, was to preserve the body, mummify it, so that the body will live forever. So with the Babylonians was this sort of spirit worship. Later on, as the nations advanced, the cruel forms died out, and the better forms remained. Some place was given to that which is called heaven, and they placed food here so that it might reach the double there. Even now the pious Hindu must, one day a year at least, place food out for the ancestors. And the day they leave off the habit will be a very sorry day for the ancestors. So you find this ancestor worship to be one cause of religion. There are now, in modern times, philosophers who advance the theory that this has been the root of all religions. There are others who advance the theory that the root of all religions was the tribal assimilation of gods into one. Now, among the Jews of the Old Testament, you do not find any mention of soul. It is only in the Talmud that that is found. They got it from the Alexandrians, and the Alexandrians from the Hindus, just as the Talmud had developed later on the idea of transmigration of the soul. But the old Jews had grand ideas of God. The God of the Jews developed into the great God, the omnipotent, the omniscient, the all-merciful God. And all this came to them from the Hindus, but not through the idea of the soul. So spiritualism could not have played any part in that, because how could the man who did not believe in any soul after death have anything to do with spiritualism? On the other hand, in the oldest portions of the Vedas, there is very little spiritualism, if any at all. These devas of the Vedas were not related to spiritualism, although later on they became so, and this idea of someone behind them, of whom they were manifestations, that is in the oldest parts. Another idea is that when the body dies, the soul, which is immortal, remains beatified. The very oldest Aryan literature, whether Greek or German or whatever, has this idea of soul. The idea of soul has come from the Hindus. Two people have given all the religion to the world, the Hindu and the Jews. But it is only with the Hindus that the idea of soul comes first, and that was shared by the Aryan races. The peculiarity you find is that the Semitic races and the Egyptians try to preserve the dead bodies, while the Aryans try to destroy them. The Greeks, the Romans, the Germans, your ancestors before they became Christians, used to burn the dead. It is only when Charlemagne made you Christians by the threat of the sword that burying came here. You see at once the metaphysical significance of burning the dead. The burying of the dead, the preserving of the body, can only remain when there is no idea of the soul and the body is all. At best, the idea came later on that this very body will have another lease on life. After so many years, mummies will come out and begin to walk the streets again. But with the Aryans, the idea was from the first that the soul is not the body and would live on. The Rig Veda has many hymns dedicated to this. It is curious that, though in modern times many hideous and cruel forms of religion crept into India, there is one peculiar idea that divides the Aryan from all other races in the world. That their religion, in the Hindu form, accepted this Indra as one with the ultimate reality. 3/4 of the mythology of the Vedas is the same as that of the Greeks. Only the old gods became saints in the new religion, but they were originally the gods of the Samhitas. One other peculiarity we must remark upon, that it is a cheerful, joyful, and almost at times hilarious religion. There is not a bit of pessimism in it. The earth is beautiful, the heavens are beautiful, life is immortal. Even after death, they get a still more beautiful body, which has none of the imperfections of this body, and they go on to live with the gods and enjoy heaven forever. On the other hand, with the Semitic races, the very first inception of religion was one of horror. Man crouched in his little house for fear. All round the houses were those doubles. The family ancestors of the Jews were there, ready to pounce upon anybody and tear him to pieces if bloody sacrifices were not given. The idea of sacrifice in India was not with this first portion. But in the next portion we find the same idea in India too, in the Brahmanas. The idea of sacrifice was originally simply giving food to the gods, but gradually it was raised and raised until it became a sacrifice to God. Philosophy came in to mystify it still more and to spin webs of logic around it, as is always done. Bloody sacrifices came into vogue. Somewhere we read that 300 bullocks have been roasted, or the gods are smelling the sacrifices and becoming very glad. Then all sorts of mystical notions come about. How the sacrifice was to be made in the form of a triangle or a square or a triangle within a square or a pentagon and all sorts of figures. But the great benefit was the evolution of geometry. When they had to make all these figures, and it was laid down strictly how many bricks should be used and how they could be laid and how big they should be, etc., natural geometry came into being. The Egyptians evolved geometry by their irrigation. They made canals to take the Nile water inside their fields, and the Hindus by their altars. Now, there is another peculiar difference between the idea of sacrifice in India and that of the Jews. The real meaning of sacrifice is worship, a worship by oblations. At first, it was simply giving food to the bright ones or the higher beings. They had gross food just as we have. Later on, philosophy stepped in, and the idea came that they, being higher beings, could not eat the same food we do. Their bodies are made of finer particles. Our bodies cannot pass through a wall. Theirs find no resistance in that wall. As such, they cannot be expected to eat the same food in the same way that we do. I need to note that at this point, according to my book, I shall just read it. It says, some parts of the transcription of the remaining portion of this lecture recorded by Mr. J.J. Goodwin were found in a severely damaged condition. Hence, we have reproduced here only the legible fragments as they appeared in the original. Mid-sentence. O Indra, I offer you this oblation. O Agni, I offer you this oblation. The answer is that these words have a mystical power in Sanskrit, and when a man in a certain state of mind pronounces these words, he sets in motion a set of psychological causes, and these produce a certain effect. That is the evolution of thought. To make it clear, suppose a man was childless and wanted a son. He worshipped Indra, and if he got a son, he said, Indra gave him a son. Later on, they said Indra did not exist. Well, then who gave the son? The whole thing is a matter of cause and effect. The text breaks off here and continues mid-sentence. They said it was not giving the gods food, but simply laying my sins upon the head of another victim. It is said, my sins go upon the goat's head, and if the goat be killed, my sins are forgiven. That idea of sacrifice of the Jews never entered India, and perhaps that has saved many a pang, many a trouble. Human nature is selfish, and the vast majority of men and women weak, and to teach vicarious sacrifice makes us more and more weak. Every child is taught that he is nothing until the poor fellow becomes hypnotized into nothing. He goes in search of somebody to cling on to, and never thinks of clinging on to himself. And thus ends the lecture, though it's incomplete. So, yes, there is an Upanishad, and I have read it on this channel that talks about Rama. I forget the name of it right now, I'm sorry. And it talks about Rama and Lakshmana and whatever, and the triangles within triangles. This geometry is mentioned in the Upanishads. But I want to go back to the very last thing I just read, and this would be a great way of ending all these videos that I've been sharing by Swami Vivekananda. Human nature is selfish. Oh, that's so true. And the vast majority of men and women weak. I truly believe that. And to teach vicarious sacrifice makes us more and more weak. Every child is taught that he is nothing until the poor fellow becomes hypnotized into nothing. He goes in search of somebody to cling on to, and never thinks of clinging to himself. I believe this is exactly what has happened to society a century later. We are teaching our children to not believe in a God. God is nothing. Religion is bad. Believe in nothing. You can't even believe in yourself. There's nothing bigger than yourself. And you're taught that you are nothing. You are a racist. You're a white supremacist. You are a virus. You are horrible. You are evil. You are this. You are that. You are toxic. And you spend your life now searching for something to make you feel good, because society has taught you that nothing is there. We have never had, I believe, a society of atheism. I don't think such a society exists. We've always had societies that have been focused on gods, Greek, Roman, whoever. Think about it. But I think today they are trying to teach a society of atheists. The problem is, an atheist still wants meaning in life. An atheist still wants to believe in things, they just believe there's nothing there to believe in. But if you're a weak person and there is nothing to believe in, that can fill you with hopelessness and sadness and listlessness. Why work hard if it doesn't matter? Why work at all if it doesn't matter? Why not just sit back and collect money from the government? Because life doesn't matter. And that is the end of society. When people think that life doesn't matter, but I think he predicted the future here. He didn't know it, and it's good that he's not with us today, because I think he would be turning in his grave. Actually, no, I mean, he probably is turning with his grave if he can see us today, because actually he would have been burned, so he wouldn't have turned. You know what I'm saying. If he could see where life went, he predicted it. We didn't listen. He predicted it. This brings us to a close of this part of my channel and talking about these lectures and sharing these lectures from Swami Vivekananda. Just a joyous, joyous moment. And we will return to him. This is just volume 9 that I've read from. There's 8 more volumes of some really cool stuff. I won't read them all. You can check them out online. I think you can download them. You can buy them. The complete set's going to put you back a little bit of money, and I think it's rather hard to find. Usually you find the books singly. But if you love Vivekananda, it's well worth diving into this, and there's lots more in this book that's worth reading. So thank you for coming with me on this journey into one of our greatest of greatest teachers. I truly believe, here in the West anyways. So, yeah. Oh, Vivekananda. Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Shri Swaminarayan. Jai Shri Swamiji Vivekananda.